Breakthrough is not an option. Breakthrough has become a necessity. You see, we are at the end of a developmental process that ends by consciousness forcing itself to think about itself in really abstract terms, because science, which is how we want to explain the world, has pushed understanding to the very point of consciousness itself. And that's where the whole thing explodes open. And it's not about whether we break through or whether we don't break through. It's about we have to break through because there are feedback loops set up into the structure of the development of consciousness itself that reach a maximum when consciousness starts to look at itself in a sense scientifically. And this also corresponds perfectly to the sudden ominous threat of a technological singularity, the sense that technology itself is becoming somehow self-aware, and that this is an encroaching threat not only to our sense of safety, but an encroaching threat to our sense of self and what reality is and what reality can be. So it's set up into the system that this is the moment that the whole thing pops open. This is the time. We are there. Because and what it is, as you start to see, is that this threat of the technological singularity, this threat of self-aware computers, is in fact just a psychological manifestation of consciousness's own kind of breaking out of its past causal system into a higher level causal system that integrates thinking about consciousness itself into itself, in its explanation of itself. And suddenly concepts like God become almost structural necessities to kind of make sense of how the system is organizing itself, really as a matrix of information, with matter as a kind of concept in the matrix. And this is absolutely, this is why breakthrough is not an option. There's no just continuing on. There's no just stabilizing. There's no flatlining human consciousness or human civilization, therefore. And the problem is technology is done. I mean, all the technology that's advancing at a spectacular rate is what? It's technology of consciousness. It's technology of communication, the communication of ideas, the communication of means. It's no longer brick and mortar technology. And it can't be anymore. That is maxed out. We know it's maxed out because now we're at the informational level. And it's all part of the same process of consciousness really becoming self-reflective of itself in a much more higher vibration, if you will. And there are just feedback loops in these scientific explanations of consciousness, particularly the integrated information theory of consciousness, that force consciousness kind of out of itself. And what has to be uncovered now is that the dynamics of being have to be talked about, not just in an abstract way, but in a way that we can relate to as people, as part of the information matrix, including the bottom line grounding system of emotions, which kind of runs the whole thing. And that's sort of worked into reality. And basically, we have to rediscover how spiritual truths are the same truths as scientific truths. Really? I mean, we're at the point where there's going to be no difference. And then theological explanations and meta-historical explanations and how they relate to entropy systems, I mean, all this is just part of it. Capitalism, as a weird kind of now self-organizing structure in the world with its own theological agenda, has like a false mind. It has a force to it that's barreling somewhere, but it doesn't really exist, is what I'm saying. It's as if it existed. And yet it has this kind of inertia towards it, towards a place that we can't even make sense of anymore because capital just becomes about itself or something. Meanwhile, consciousness is starting to go the other direction and exploding into self-understanding in a real way. And it's that consciousness can't deal with its own management of itself much longer. And it keeps building more and more elaborate information systems, insurance programs to manage it all. And you can see this manifested in systems and systems and systems throughout the world. Money and economy is probably the most revealing in terms of what the structure's doing. But so reality needs to start to center again around more existential truths, truths that might give us a distance from all the scientific explanations we've had for the world, to see those as a certain kind of explanation, but that there are other kinds of explanations possible which are probably more valid because they reflect deeper understanding levels, because they're integrating consciousness into the story of explanation itself. Total self-reflection is what's going on. Radical, final self-reflection of consciousness. The new layer of consciousness, if you think of consciousness, and then you have self-reflective consciousness, which is what the human being was, emerged out of cavemen into modern civilization. And now we have this new layer emerging, self-self consciousness, where the self-consciousness parts become part of its own explanation of itself. I have to take a sip of water, sorry. Its own explanation of itself. This is unavoidable, but once you see it's unavoidable, then you see how it's all structurally part of the system. That this point that's coming to us of understanding is like a strange attractor in a chaotic system, but it always barrels towards the strange attractor. Breakthrough means different kinds of explanations of what's going on, such that the normal boundaries of what we thought was possible, even in terms of resources, is changed because we just don't look at reality the same way anymore. It's like the global loaves and fishes, because what we realize is a resource is a kind of programming object that we can manipulate if we loosen certain strands of explanation in different directions. I mean, you start to see how you can control reality through manipulating its presentation in consciousness, primarily through explanations with language and then language programming itself. What's the ultimate programming language? Think about what a programming language is. It's you trying to communicate to a computer in as efficient as a way for you as possible to make that you can then translate into the computer. But you wanted to make it as directly your intention as possible, and then you have to work through a translation system. Well, the ultimate programming language would be language itself. Because language itself is as close to intention as you can verbalize with concepts and forms. It's the direct confrontation with your own understanding of intention. Language is the direct confrontation of your own understanding of intention. And therefore, the ultimate programming language would be for me to talk to a computer and just have that computer understand me in terms of what I want and need to program into it. What my vision is of my program. And I would just tell it as best I can. Just in words. This is what reality is. We are programming reality through conceptual systems and boundary spaces of what we conceive to be possible, and the way we ramify those with our language, and what concepts we want to dominate, and what verifications we look for in order to verify the models that we've developed, when in fact one of the rules of reality is that where you look for verification, you tend to find explanation. In other words, it's a little like you make it up and then figure it out later for any kind of explanation. And so the ultimate programming language is just what is intended as best spoken as possible. Reality is the ultimate programming language. We are there. And you can see now how it's either breakthrough or disaster. But it's not disaster because you have the correct concept at the heart, which organizes the whole system as it discovers its own freedom, which is God, and which is Jesus Christ.